Brace yourself. Get it passed up anytime now. Collect yourself. Things will never be the same in this sad world. Around a lot of it, trying to make the pieces fit to a puzzle with a million missing pieces. When I'm feeling fine is when I discover that I'm afraid to blow my cover, and there's something very wrong with this. So sit back in your hole.
All right, good morning, folks. Good to be with you today. So what I want to talk to you about is what I think is a moral crisis in our civilization today. But I don't want you to get the wrong impression. This is not a message of hopelessness. In many ways, this is the greatest time to be alive. This is the greatest time to be a human being by almost any meaningful metric. As far as economically, the number of people who are desperately poor has never been lower. As far as health and lifespan, the number of people living into old age has never been higher. The number of babies dying and women dying in childbirth has never been lower. Worldwide, in many ways, in fact, I highly recommend, there's a book called The Better Angels of Our Nature by Steven Pinker, which makes the case that this is the greatest time to be alive. But the fact that it may well be the greatest time to be alive doesn't mean that it's perfect. And the fact that these 10 things are better than ever doesn't mean that everything is better than ever. There's a philosopher named Alistair MacIntyre, and this has been more than 40 years ago, I think. He wrote a book called After Virtue, where he diagnosed what he considers to be a moral crisis in our society. But that doesn't mean that we don't have a strong moral sense. I think we have a very strong moral sense in this day and age. There are things that we are not afraid to speak out and say, these things are evil. Give me a couple of them. What are some things that are evil? Murder is evil. What else is evil? Genocide, she says. Yeah. Well, yeah. She takes. Look at her taking the courage. Too bad you weren't on camera because you took a courageous stand against genocide. What else is evil? Yeah, rape. We're anti-rape, aren't we? If you're not, you probably don't want to admit that. A couple of things that jump to mind to me that we have a strong moral sense, that we're not afraid to stand up and say that is evil. One is sexual abuse of children. We don't hesitate to say, no, the pedophiles are evil. That's wrong. You can't do that. I doubt anyone in this room would be interested to hear the justification that a child abuser has to give. Well, no, tell me, why did you do that? Why do you think that's okay? Why, change my mind if you can. No, we name and label that as evil, rightfully so. Racism, we as a society name and label as evil, right? Perhaps more so now than ever. And there are things that we name as good in our society. Tolerance is a big value for our society, being non-judgmental against other people and their lifestyles. Anti-racism is an important value for many of us in this society, that we need to stand up and oppose those who want to treat others as if they're less valuable on account of their race. So the issue isn't that we don't have a moral sense, but the issue that Alistair MacIntyre points out is that underneath the moral language we use, when we call something good, when we call something evil, we've actually sort of given up on those terms having any real meaning. That that the reason that pedophilia and racism, the reason we call them evil, is because they sicken us and they anger us. Well, they should sicken us, they should anger us, but we use the language of good and evil, and according to McIntyre, it distracts us from the fact that we actually stopped believing in good and evil many generations ago. He's going to compare it to, or actually no, I'm going to adapt him and make this comparison. You know, in the ancient world, in the Middle Ages, we used to think that the earth was the center of reality, and the sun came up, traveled around the earth, and then went down. Right? And that's where we get the term sunrise and sunset. We don't believe that anymore, but we still use the language of sunrise and sunset. Of course, there's no harm in using the language of sunrise and sunset. But McIntyre argues that we still use the language of good and evil, and we still think we believe in good and evil, but many of us stopped actually believing in good and evil generations ago. In the Middle Ages, remember, one of my key themes, and I inherit this from Joseph Pieper, is pointing back to older ways of thought, and not saying new ways of thought are bad, but saying that there are some parts of older ways of thought that perhaps we were too quick to get rid of. In the Middle Ages, people viewed reality as this great hierarchical chain of being, and everything in reality, from God up at the top to the dirt under your feet at the bottom, had its proper place and had its proper function. And we understood good and evil to be fulfilling your proper role in that sort of that divine hierarchy, to fulfilling a divine purpose. Many people are still religious. Many people still believe in God, but certainly over the last 500 years, that number has been shrinking. And beginning about 500 years ago, we turned away from that medieval vision, which I'm not saying was perfect, and we tried to replace it with other explanations for good and evil. So we had, remember, deontology, Immanuel Kant, the duty-based ethic, right? So when you've got an ethical question, you imagine that the thing you want to do was a universal principle. Right? You universalize the principle. You said, well, if everybody did this, what would happen? And that way you reason to what your duty is. It wasn't a dumb idea, but it failed. It failed completely. Because you can't universalize any scenario. Every moral choice you face, every situation you enter into has different factors, different variables. And that's why it's so easy to overthrow Kant by using the example of the Nazis knocking on the door and saying, are you hiding any Jews in this house? If you're the people hiding Anne Frank and you believe in deontology and duty-based ethics, then your duty is to tell the truth no matter what. Well, obviously that's absurd in that situation. So deontology failed. The other alternative was utilitarianism. We determine what's good and what's evil based on the consequences. And to do that, you have to be able to figure out which actions will cause the most pleasure and the least pain. Right? You have to be able to run like a mathematical calculation to do that. Utilitarianism failed too, because you can't assign numbers to pleasures. Is the pleasure of a steak dinner, is that a 7 and reading a great book is a 6 or a 12? If somebody fits all the stereotypes of someone likely to commit a crime, do you kill them in advance to decrease the amount of suffering in the world? How do you answer that? Utilitarian can't answer that. So we turned away We turned away from the medieval vision of the great chain of being and a virtue-based ethics, that to be ethical is to be most fully human, the glory of God is man most fully alive. And we attempted to replace it with duty-based ethics. That failed. We attempted to replace it with utilitarianism, consequence-based ethics, and that failed. And what we're left with, it's not exactly relativism. We're willing to say some things are wrong and some things are right. But we say they're wrong and they're right based almost entirely on our emotions. That may not be true in every case of every person in the room, but as a civilization, our sense of good and evil, we are emotivists, is tied to how we feel. Sometimes that's helpful. It is helpful, it is morally helpful to be sickened and angered by pedophiles and rapists. And racists and rapists. But is it the case that our emotions are a reliable determiner of what's right and wrong? Let me give you a very personal and very real example for me right now. Okay, so my father's dead. My mother's very sick. She's having brain surgery today. If a genie popped up and said, I'll give you both your parents back perfectly healthy, 100 strangers have to die. I know what I would feel like doing. I know what my emotions would pull me toward. But that's not a moral choice. That's a textbook definition of a temptation. To tie our sense of right and wrong to what we feel is to actually elevate temptation to the role of deciding factor in morality. Who are my athletes here? Do I have athletes? Joshua, Allison, what do you play? Volleyball. She plays volleyball, and another guy plays football. All right? So let's say you got a game in 2 hours. What's your favorite food? Or a food that you like? What's a food that you like? Fries. And what's a food that you like? A sub sandwich. Okay. Well, I'm going to go with the fries just because you can smell the fries cooking. So you got a game in 2 hours, and you smell French fries. All right. Now, you want those French fries. You want them real bad. Your emotions are pulling you toward those French fries. Is it a good idea to pig out on French fries right before a game? No. See, our emotions are. Emotions aren't bad. Emotions aren't irrelevant. I'm not giving you the bumper sticker reality doesn't care about your feelings speech. Emotions are important, but they can't rule the day. We as a society have let them rule the day in our moral decision making, and we haven't even noticed it because we've continued to use the language of good and evil as if we still believed in them. What I want to suggest to you today and tomorrow in this conversation we're having, I'm making a bit of a shift here. I'm going to do something I don't normally do, but since it's a college class, I'm going to do it. I'm going to take a side. All right? Not on specific moral questions. I'm still not going to tell you what I think about abortion or euthanasia or death penalty or anything like that. But I'm going to come out in favor of a particular approach to ethics. I'm a virtue ethicist. And it's my belief that virtue ethics, which was Aristotle's approach to ethics, is the best way to figure out what's right and wrong that's ever been developed. That's not the same thing as saying that Aristotle's right about everything, okay? So philosophers aren't prophets. They're not religious leaders, all right? So if you've got 2 Christians, they might, and they're discussing something Jesus says in the gospel, they might disagree with each other about what that meant. They might disagree with each other about how to apply that today. But chances are neither one of them feels free to say, well, I just think Jesus was wrong about this. But philosophers are not prophets, they're not religious leaders, and they're not magic 8 balls. So you can't shake Aristotle and get shake Aristotle and find out whether human cloning is okay. Aristotle says nothing about human cloning. You can't shake Aristotle and find out, whether 15-year-olds should begin medically transitioning gender or not. Aristotle's not talking about that. But I believe you can shake Aristotle and get the best method ever developed for finding the answers to those questions yourself. So that's why I asked you to read the first couple chapters of Aristotle's book, the Nicomachean Ethics. Aristotle literally wrote the book on ethics, and he came up with the word. He's not the first person to talk about morality, but he gave us the word ethics. He gave us politics, too. Those are both brand new words from Aristotle, plus the way we categorize living things into kingdom, phylum, genus, species. That's Aristotle, because he did a little bit of everything. Ethics is not what we've been doing in this class, what we'll continue to do, what we'll do through the roundtables. It involves learning, but ethics is not about learning information about good and evil, right and wrong. Ethics is about becoming good, about being good and becoming better. And at least from Aristotle's perspective, and from mine, that also means being happy and becoming happier. That the good life, the morally good life, is equivalent to the happy life. Ethics is about character. When we speak about our character, the Greek word that we get character from, it literally means, it's the same word the Greeks would use for when you're carving something into stone or etching something in stone or even tattooing something on flesh, would use the same root that gives us character. Character has to do with our habits, the habits that we build up that genuinely form and change who we are. It's those habits that make us good or that make us bad. And the character, you can say, is the greatest determining factor that you can control for your success or failure in life. Professional success, economic success, romantic success, family success. Of all the things you can control, your character is the most important driving force. There are things you can't control, right? If a meteor falls out of the sky and knocks your head off, you're not going to be very successful in life from that point forward. Too bad, so sad for you. Nothing you can do about that. But if I am a liar, well, that's going to have an impact on my career. It's going to have an impact on my family life. It's going to have an impact on my romantic relationships. It's going to have an impact on every aspect of my life. A negative impact eventually. Oh, it might get me through the day without having to get in trouble for something. But at the end of the day, it will destroy me. Of all the things we can control, character has the biggest impact on our life. And character, as we'll see as we flesh this discussion out today and tomorrow, is that character is really about how fully human we are. The stronger our character, the more we are living up to our potential of what it is to be human, the more real and the more really human we are. And the weaker our character is, the more that when I'm carving into myself, I'm deforming myself, well then the less human I am and the less successful and the less happy I will be. So let's take a look at what Aristotle has to say. Look at the very first sentence in the Ethics. He says, every art and every inquiry, likewise every action and choice, seems to aim at some good. And hence it has been beautifully said that the good is that at which all things aim. when I asked you to read this, I said, Aristotle's very dense, and he can pack into a single sentence the things that it would take me an hour to talk about. And this sentence is like the ultimate example of that. Because in one sentence, he has just pointed to every possible kind of human action that is distinctively human. What's he talk about? He talks about art. When he talks about art, he uses the Greek word techne. He doesn't just mean fine art, painting and music and dance and literature. He means that. But what does techne sound like? What English word does techne sound like? Technical, yes. Aristotle uses art here to mean any time we create something on purpose. It's an art in Aristotle's sense. So building houses and fixing cars and plumbing and anything we make on purpose is an art. And he says inquiry. What's inquiry? What does it mean to inquire?
Question.
To question. And the word here he uses, the Greek word is methodos. What's that sound like? Methodos. Method, yeah. So here, inquiry is supposed to cover any formal pursuit of knowledge. Yes, if I ask my man's, how much are you? I got a student in the room who sells Doritos. I say, how much are Doritos? Yeah, that's an inquiry. But also, if I'm asking, how do I establish colonies for human beings on Mars? Or how do I cure cancer? Or what are good and evil? Those are also inquiries. Those are also methods. So we've got the things we build. We've got the pursuit of knowledge. And then he says every action, excuse me just a second. The Greek word for action there is praxis. What does that sound like? Practice. So we get practice and practical from that Greek word, practice. So action, anything we do on purpose. All right? And then choice. Now choice is the driving force of ethics. All of this depends on our ability to freely choose between alternatives. I'm going to quote here another philosopher named Larry Arn. He says, human beings we're going to discover face obstacles. And the virtues are the good confrontation and tackling of those obstacles. We talk about, go for it, just don't trip. When we talk about virtue, when we talk about those good habits, what we're talking about is the ability to confront challenges, obstacles, and make choices that are healthy, that will make us the best version of ourselves. And if you do that, it will change you and it will make you better. It's this text and this inquiry and this work that we do in this class are about making you awesome. All right? The way I've taught it in the past, before I decided I'm going to take my stand on virtue ethics, people have enjoyed the class and they've gotten a lot out of it, but it has come across as, okay, here's a bunch of stuff that different people thought about a bunch of stuff, but whatever, I guess. That's not what this should be. This course is probably the most hopeful course you'll ever take, because the main point of this course is you can be great. Now let's find out how. You can be awesome. Now let's find out how. This raises a question here. After he mentions all those things, and those things include everything, so they don't include your heart beating and breathing, but every animal's heart beats and breathes. They don't include taking in nutrition and growing, because vegetables do that too. But the things that make us human, art, inquiry, action, choice, he says that the good is that at which all things aim. He's saying that every choice anyone makes, any action anyone takes, is aimed at a good. That everyone is always trying to do good. Does that seem... Suha's making a face. Does that seem crazy to you, Suha? How come? Some people do things that are malicious intent. There are murderers out there, aren't there? Was Jeffrey Dahmer trying to do good when he killed and ate folks? So Aristotle would say yes. And here, let's just bracket off two groups where we're not specifically talking about. So we're not talking about very, very young children who don't yet have the ability to reason. And I'm not saying this is not true about them, but that's not who we're talking about. And we're not talking about actual insane people who don't know good from evil. This may be true of them too, but that's not who we're talking about. But we're talking about most of us, all right? We've reached the age of reason, and we're intelligent and we're sane. Aristotle says, yes, everything you do and everything everyone does is aimed toward a good. Murderers? Well, why do people murder? So the largest number of people I've ever killed in a single day is 0. So I'm not speaking from personal experience here. But why do we kill? Well, somebody has done something wrong to me, all right? And I'm very angry at what this person has done. I want justice. My way of going about it isn't right, okay? But I don't want evil. I want the good of justice. I want the good of satisfaction. I'm just pursuing the wrong good, but I'm still pursuing good. I kill somebody because I'm stealing from them. Is that I want this person to be dead and his family to grieve for its own sake? No, I want the money so that I can buy the stuff that I want. Money's good. The stuff that I want is good. The things I want are good, but my only problem is I've made a terrible choice in valuing what good is more important and what good is less important. I'm putting the good of this money as if it's more important than the good of my man's life. Apparently I just murdered you, my man's. Sorry. And so I've inverted. I've pursued the lesser good over the greater good, but I'm still in pursuit of good. We're in a high school. Sometimes in high school there's gossip. Have you ever experienced that? Or is it a shock to anyone that there's gossip? And people spread rumors maliciously, right, Suha? They spread rumors. They either find the most embarrassing true thing about you and put it in the worst light, or just make stuff up. Caitlin, does that surprise you that people do? They just make stuff up. And it seems like they're doing it just because they want to hurt somebody. In reality, what's usually going on is that the person doing the gossiping has a devastatingly low amount of self-esteem and a catastrophically wounded sense of self-worth, right? And what does that person really want? That person wants attention, right? That person wants to be lifted up, but because that person has lost sight of his or her actual ability to become great and has given up on their own greatness, they think the only way I can be lifted up is if I knock everybody else down. At the end of the day, what they really want is a sense of self-worth. They want something good. They've just inverted. They've valued their own sense of self-worth over the justice, over what's owed to other people. Ethical choices, moral choices, are rarely between good and evil. Most moral choices are about the relative value of competing goods. That's when we have a moral dilemma. Right? So you've got, let's say you've got the SAT coming up, or a big exam coming up, and it's coming up tomorrow, all right? What do you need to do? You need to study. You need to get to bed at a reasonable hour so you're well rested for the test. But, you know, they don't take TikTok off the internet because you have the SAT. They don't, video games don't stop existing because you have the SAT tomorrow, and all those things are still calling out to you, and now you've got a choice to make. It's not a choice between good and evil. It's a choice between goods. Whatever it is you get out of TikTok is a good. I don't get that same good out of TikTok, but whatever it is you get out of it is a good. Whatever you get, the sense of camaraderie and the excitement that you get from playing video games is a good. You know, or maybe you want to stay up and party, right? Well, the pleasure and the fun that you get from the party is a good, but if you're valuing it over a good night's sleep the night before you take the SAT, what's going to happen, Alejandro? Not going to do very well. Not going to do very well at all. So if Aristotle's right, and I think he is, everything we do is aimed at a good. Right? We become our best selves. We become better. We become more great the more we choose the greater good over the lesser good. That raises a question. And the question is, what does it mean to be good? What is this goodness that Aristotle is talking about? I'm looking at the schedule and I can't make any sense of it. Oh, no, now it makes sense. To answer this, I'm sorry, like Jersham and Suhau, who were in my career development course, you just saw this a few days ago, so it's going to be a rerun for you. But to answer this for you, and if you took I got a few left who took humanities years ago. Caitlin did, yeah. We're going to go deep into the archives. We're going to go back to the year 2020. Remember 2020? Remember when COVID first hit and we were all working from home, even the teachers? I'm going to show you something I put together for my students at the time to show what Aristotle means when he talks about goodness.
Brace yourself. Get it passed up anytime now. Collect yourself. Things will never be the same in a sad, sad world.
This is a good taco. This is a bad taco. What's the difference between the two? Well, if you ask Aristotle, you'll remember that every being has what's called a final cause. The final cause is the goal or purpose or meaning of that being. It doesn't come to the being from the outside. The being has its final cause just because of the kind of being that it is. What's the final cause of a taco? Well, it's to provide nutrition. You eat it and it builds up your body. And it's to provide pleasure. Tacos are good. They taste good. You get joy and happiness from eating them. A being is good or bad for Aristotle depending on how well it fulfills or lives out its final cause, its purpose. The taco on the left is successful at accomplishing its purpose. And yes, it's almost as if the taco wants to provide nutrition and to give pleasure. Aristotle doesn't think a taco actually has a mind, but it is as if every being, even a taco, has a goal, has something that it, quote unquote, wants to do. The taco on the left has succeeded, so it is good. The taco on the right has failed, and so it is bad. This is a good haircut. This is a bad haircut. What's the purpose or final cause of a haircut? Well, part of it is to keep cool and keep the hair out of your face. So any haircut that takes enough off meets that purpose. But the main purpose, I think, for most of us in a haircut is to look good. With that final cause of haircut, I think all would agree that this is a bad haircut. This is a good person. This is a bad person. Hopefully you're picking up on the pattern here now. Aristotle would say that the reason Dr. King is a good person and Hitler is a bad person is because Dr. King successfully lived out his purpose or his goal as a human being, his final cause. Hitler, on the other hand, failed as a human being. So I've been shaving my head ever since, by the way. Why did I start shaving my head? I'm not naturally bald. It still grows in long and thick. But so I did it for that video just to amuse, because remember, this is the beginning of COVID. Everyone was stuck at home and scared, so I just did it to amuse my students. But it made my life so much easier. So much easier, because Florida is hot. Now, the last time I told that story, I said it just that way, and the student I was talking to says, "Well, you've got a pretty strong self-esteem," and I'm like, I didn't say I'm hot because I shaved my head. I have a firm enough grasp on reality to know that where my strengths are and where they are not. But anyway, at any rate, something is good. Something is good if it is most fully the kind of thing that it is. All right? This desk is good. What's a desk for? Putting things on and writing on or eating on. So this desk is a little wobbly, but still all right. Okay? If this desk were so flimsy that it collapsed every time I put my arms on it to write, then it would be a bad desk. We've got a cup here. Okay? Come on. I'm thirsty. I'm gonna get myself a drink of water here. That's. Oh, what? Is this a good cup? No, it's not a good cup at all. Why? Because it's got a hole in it, and the hole means, this wound means that it's not able to do the thing that cups are supposed to do. My water is not supposed to be all over the floor. By the way, if any of you slip and fall on the way out, I want you to remember these words. Caitlin Potter dumped water on the floor. We're about to finish for today, and we'll pick up tomorrow. But imagine for a second. Obviously, cups aren't self-aware, as far as we know. Cups don't know anything. They don't want anything. But imagine for a second this cup were aware. Right? This cup knew that it was a cup. It knew what cups are supposed to do. Would this be a happy cup? No. This would be a sad, miserable. This would be a vicious cup. This cup is missing key virtues of what it means to be a cup. We're going to turn that around and make application to ourselves as human beings tomorrow as we continue this discussion of Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, Book 1. That's all I need from you for today. The rest of the time is yours.
Walk around a lot a bit, trying to make the pieces fit to a puzzle with a million missing pieces. When I'm feeling fine is when I discover that I'm afraid to blow my cover, and there's something very wrong with this. So sit back in your hole. or get back in your cave. If I'm going down, I'm taking someone